Welcome, fellow seekers of forbidden knowledge, to another deep exploration here at Keen Lore. Today, we're unraveling one of Elden Ring's most profound mysteries, the impossible existence of Queen Marika the Eternal and Radagon of the Golden Order. Two beings, yet one. Two wills in perpetual conflict, bound within a single divine vessel. Their story isn't just about godhood or power. It's about identity fractured, love twisted into self-destruction, and the terrible price of divine ascension. Picture this moment. You're standing in the grand capital of Leyndell, before an imposing statue of Radagon, champion of the Golden Order. The golden light filters through stained glass, casting long shadows across marble floors worn smooth by countless pilgrims. But then you raise your hand, fingers tracing the ancient gesture of the law of regression, that fundamental incantation that reveals all things converge, that all meanings melt into one. The air shimmers, reality bends, and before your eyes the statue transforms. Radagon's powerful form shifts, melts, reforms, becoming Queen Marika herself. The secret that shattered a sculptor's mind, that drove Brother Corhin to madness, now stands revealed before you. Radagon is Marika. This revelation doesn't just recontextualize a few story beats, it fundamentally reshapes everything we understand about the lands between, about the Golden Order, about the very nature of divinity itself. How can two people be one? How can they love others, bear children with different spouses, wage wars against each other's will, and ultimately destroy themselves in an act of simultaneous creation and annihilation? These aren't just questions about lore. They're questions about the fundamental nature of existence in a world where gods walk among mortals, where souls can be split and merged, where identity itself becomes fluid as quicksilver. The implications ripple outward like waves from a stone cast into still water. Every demigod's lineage becomes more complex. Every historical event gains new meaning. The shattering itself transforms from an act of singular rebellion into something far more tragic, a god at war with herself, tearing reality apart in her desperate struggle for freedom while simultaneously trying to preserve it. Let me take you deeper into this mystery, through the veiled history of the lands between, through alchemical symbolism and divine metaphor, to understand not just what Radagon and Marika are, but why their existence represents both the apex and the tragedy of the Golden Order itself. They're described as soulmates in the truest sense, two halves of the same soul that may have been born in different bodies, later unified into a transcendent being inspired by the alchemical concept of the Rebis. In medieval alchemy, the Rebis represents the perfect being, the divine hermaphrodite, born from the union of the Red King and the White Queen. This alchemical marriage symbolizes transcendent power, the culmination of the alchemist's quest to achieve balance and perfection, ultimately empowered by a dragon, which in Elden Ring's case manifests as the Elden Beast. But understanding their nature requires us to first understand their origins, shrouded as they are in mystery and contradiction. Marika's story begins in shadow and ascends to blazing glory. She was born a Numen, one of that long-lived race said to have come from outside the lands between. The Numen weren't merely foreign, they were otherworldly, carrying within their blood a connection to powers beyond the scope of normal understanding. Evidence suggests many Numen lived in the Eternal City, destroyed long ago, and Marika's title as the Eternal hints at this connection, as does the fact that the weapon of a Nox priest bears striking resemblance to Marika's hammer. Her path to godhood wasn't given, it was taken. Through conquest, through cunning, through sacrifices we're only beginning to understand, Marika rose from her origins to become the vessel of the Elden Ring itself. She became the living conduit between the greater will and the lands between. The golden goddess who would establish an age of apparent prosperity while harboring seeds of its own destruction. But here's where the mystery deepens, where the comfortable narrative of a goddess and her champion begins to crack like ice under spring sun. Radagon's origins are far murkier, deliberately obscured, perhaps even by Marika herself. Unlike every other significant figure in the lands between's history, Radagon seems to emerge from nowhere, fully formed, champion without a past. The only concrete clue to his origins lies in his distinctive red hair, which he famously despised. The giant's red braid reveals that every giant is red of hair, and that Radagon's red locks might have been a curse of their kind, suggesting he was born after the war against the giants. Think about that timing. Marika declares war on the fire giants, those ancient enemies of the Erdtree. She commands Godfrey and his warriors to put them to the sword, to confine the flame atop the mountain, and then, only after this war, does Radagon appear. Was he born from this conflict? Was he created by it? Some theorize that Radagon was planted within Marika by the Elden Beast itself, a parasitic self designed to ensure her loyalty to the greater will, that Marika is the base form and Radagon the control mechanism. The evidence for this is compelling. Radagon's statues always feature a distinctive grid-like pattern behind him, the same lattice pattern that appears on the thorns blocking access to the Erdtree, implying it was Radagon who erected these barriers after Marika shattered the Elden Ring. Yet other interpretations suggest something even more complex. What if Radagon wasn't imposed upon Marika, but rather emerged from her own internal conflicts? What if he represents not external control, but the part of herself that sought order, perfection, the part that believed in the Golden Order even as another part of her began to question it? When Radagon first appears in recorded history, he leads a golden host against Raya Lucaria, meeting Lady Rennala in battle. But then something unprecedented happens. He repents his territorial aggressions and marries the Carrion Queen, producing 3 children, Radahn, Rykard, and Runny. Later, when Godfrey was banished, Radagon abandoned Rennala to become Marika's second husband and king consort. The cruelty of this abandonment cannot be overstated. Radagon left Rennala heartbroken, gifting her an amber egg before his departure, an egg that would become her obsession, cradling it endlessly in her madness after losing him. But was this truly Radagon acting of his own will? Or was this Marika calling her other self home, drawing him back like a tide returning to shore? The question of when they became one haunts every interpretation of their story. Were they always one being, unconsciously living as two? Did they merge upon their marriage, or were they originally separate, drawn together by fate or design into an union that transcended physical form? Marika's hammer reveals a crucial detail. Marika shattered the Elden Ring while Radagon used the same hammer trying to repair it. One hammer, 2 purposes, 2 wills in absolute opposition. This isn't mere disagreement, this is existential conflict at the most fundamental level. Imagine sharing your very existence with someone whose every instinct opposes your own, whose every action undermines your goals, whose very presence in your soul pulls you toward everything you're trying to escape. The words Marika speaks to Radagon, conveyed through Malena's spectral presence, carry the weight of prophecy and tragedy. O Radagon, leal hound of the Golden Order, thou'rt yet to become me. Thou'rt yet to become a god. Let us be shattered both, mine other self. These aren't words of union, they're words of destruction, of a being so fractured that only complete annihilation might bring peace. Their children bear the scars of this impossible union. When Radagon and Marika produced offspring together, Malenia and Miquella, these twin prodigies were born cursed. Miquella with eternal youth, his growth forever stunted, his plans perhaps doomed to eternal failure. Malenia with the scarlet rot, her body a vector for an outer god's influence. These weren't random afflictions. They were the inevitable result of a single being reproducing with itself, the cosmic inbreeding of a god divided. But here's what makes their story even more fascinating and tragic. They weren't unique in this divine duality. Their own children would inherit this pattern of fractured identity, as if the very nature of godhood demands this splitting of self. Miquella, their eternally young son, had his own other half, Saint Trina. Like their parents, they were 2 minds and 2 souls sharing one body. As Miquella, he appeared as a golden-haired boy, as Saint Trina, possibly female, definitely mysterious, bringing sleep and dreams to devoted followers. The parallel is unmistakable and heartbreaking. The child inherits not just power from the parents, but their very nature of division. When Miquella sought to become a god himself, he shed parts of his identity across the land of shadow, and chief among these discarded aspects was Saint Trina herself, the part of him capable of love and compassion. He literally abandoned his ability to love in pursuit of godhood, casting aside his other self in a dark mirror of his parents' union. Where Radagon and Marika were forced together, Miquella and Trina were torn apart, but both stories end in tragedy. This pattern of duality appears throughout the lands between. D and his brother are described as two bodies and two minds, but one single soul. They never stand together, never speak to one another. Yet they are fundamentally one being expressed across two forms. The world itself seems to operate on principles of division and unity, separation and convergence, as if the very fabric of reality has been shaped by Marika and Radagon's impossible existence. Understanding when and how Radagon and Marika became one might be less important than understanding what their union represents. Their situation connects to the mysterious properties of silver tears found in Nox society, those shape-shifting beings that can become anything, anyone. Radagon's use of celestial dew when marrying Rennala in the Church of Vows links him to these same principles of transformation and fluid identity. The transformation between their forms isn't mere shape-shifting, it's a fundamental rewriting of existence. When Marika's body changes into Radagon, her dress seamlessly becomes his skirt, her golden hair turns red, her feminine form becomes masculine. Yet the transition is perfectly smooth, as if both forms always existed simultaneously, merely waiting for their turn to surface. In the boss fight that serves as Elden Ring's climactic confrontation, we witness this transformation firsthand. The Tarnished encounters Marika imprisoned within the Erdtree, but suddenly she's released from her bonds. Her hair immediately turns red as Radagon assumes control of their shared body, wielding Marika's own hammer against the player. The visual poetry is devastating. The hammer that shattered the ring becomes the weapon defending what remains of it. But why did Marika shatter the Elden Ring in the first place? The answer lies not in a single moment of rebellion, but in centuries of growing disillusionment. As the centuries passed, Marika felt increasingly imprisoned by her duty as a goddess. She was bound within the Erdtree most of the time, serving as the living vessel for the greater will's power. She wanted freedom from this duty, so she attempted to shatter the Elden Ring to pieces. This wasn't a sudden decision born of madness. It was potentially a plan, long in the making. When Marika banished Godfrey and his warriors, stripping them of grace and creating the Tarnished, she told them they would be summoned back to the lands between after their deaths. This summoning of the Tarnished, which occurs at the game's start, suggests Marika was planning for the Shattering long before she enacted it. The conflict between Marika and Radagon during the Shattering represents more than just disagreement, it's a battle for the very soul of divinity. Marika shattered the Elden Ring while Radagon worked desperately to repair it, their shared body becoming a battlefield where creation and destruction occurred simultaneously. Imagine the agony of that moment, your own hand destroying what your other hand tries to save. Your will split so fundamentally that you're literally tearing yourself apart. After the Shattering, the greater will's punishment was swift and brutal. The Elden Beast crucified Marika upon a giant rune arc, imprisoning her within the Erdtree. The pose mirrors the Elden Beast's grab attack during the boss fight, where it similarly crucifies the player on an arc of light, piercing them with golden spears. But there's a crucial detail. The needle impaling Marika's abdomen is the same color as the Rune of Death, suggesting her punishment involves a kind of living death, an eternal torment where she can neither fully die nor truly live. The imprisonment served multiple purposes. It punished Marika's rebellion while preserving her as the vessel of the Elden Ring. It kept Radagon close to the ring he sought to repair. And it created a stasis that would last until a Tarnished strong enough to claim the throne could arrive. But was this the greater will's plan, or was it part of Marika's design all along? The tragedy deepens when we consider their children's fates. When Radagon became Marika's new Elden Lord after Godfrey's banishment, their union as a single being becoming a marriage was possible only because their true nature wasn't publicly known. The demigod children scattered after the Shattering, each claiming shards of the Elden Ring, warring against each other in a conflict that mirrors their parents' internal struggle. Malenia, revealed through shadow of the Erdtree to be another of Marika's children, carries her mother's words and will throughout the lands between. She was born at the foot of the Erdtree, a secret child of Queen Marika, though not born of a mother. The game files label her as Marika of Daughter, and she's confirmed as Messmer's younger sister. Through Malenia, we hear echoes of Marika's true thoughts, her regrets, her plans, her desperate hope that someone might succeed where she failed. The connection between parent and child, between divided selves across generations, suggests that this pattern of duality might be inherent to Godhood itself in the lands between. The fact that both Marika Radagon and Miquella Trina share this dual nature implies that splitting oneself might be an attribute inherent to gods, perhaps even a requirement for achieving godhood. To become divine is to become divided, to carry within yourself your own opposition, your own undoing. But there's another layer to consider, the role of the greater will and its representative, the Elden Beast, in creating or maintaining this duality. When Radagon falls in the boss fight, his body is subsumed by the Elden Beast, transforming into a large sword that the cosmic entity wields against the player. This transformation suggests that Radagon was always more tool than person in the greater will's design, a weapon shaped like a man, or perhaps a man reduced to a weapon's purpose. The visual symbolism throughout their story reinforces themes of unity and division. The Erdtree itself, golden and singular from a distance, reveals itself to be riddled with fractures up close. The two fingers, representatives of the greater will, are literally a single hand divided. The Elden Ring itself is a circle broken into pieces, unity shattered into multiplicity. Everything in this world speaks to the fundamental tension between wholeness and fragmentation. Their influence extends beyond the metaphysical into the very structure of the Golden Order society. The fundamentalist incantations that Brother Corhan obsesses over, particularly the law of regression that reveals their secret, speak to a theological system built on paradox. The law of regression reveals that Radagon and Marika are the same person when cast before their statue, but this same law preaches that all things converge, that regression is the pull of meaning toward unity. Yet their very existence proves that unity and division can coexist, that one can be two, that convergence and divergence happen simultaneously. The alchemical symbolism deserves deeper examination because it provides a framework for understanding their existence that transcends simple metaphor. If we accept the alchemical parallel, then Marika and Radagon were likely two separate beings at one point. Marika, as a mortal who became the greater will's vessel, needed a lord to be complete, not for political reasons, but for mystical ones. She was an imperfect vessel for the Elden Ring until she achieved union with her other half. The problems this caused were immediate and far-reaching. Radagon was already married to Rennala when Marika identified him as her match, and his abandonment of the Carrion Queen caused devastation that rippled through generations. His leaving possibly sparked Ranni's quest to destroy everything the greater will had built. One divine union destroyed a mortal one, and from that destruction came the seeds of the Golden Order's downfall. The question of consciousness haunts their story. Did they know they were one when they lived as two? The text suggests they might not have fully understood their connection, as both had other lovers and bore children with them. Or perhaps they knew but couldn't admit it, even to themselves. The sculptor who discovered their secret and hid it within the statue, what did that knowledge do to him? Did it break his mind to realize that the God he worshipped and the Lord he served were one being pretending to be two? Their story becomes even more poignant when we consider the emotional reality of their existence. Marika loved Godfrey, by all accounts genuinely. She bore him 3 children, made him Elden Lord, and even promised him he would return. Radagon loved Rennala enough to marry her, to father children with her, to give her a parting gift that would define the rest of her existence. Were these loves real? Can a being divided against itself experience genuine emotion, or is everything filtered through the lens of that fundamental split? Marika's words to Radagon reveal a complex emotional landscape. O Radagon, leal hound of the Golden Order, thou'rt yet to become me, thou'rt yet to become a god. Let us be shattered both. Mine other self. There's contempt there, calling him a hound, but also recognition, even a twisted form of affection in mine other self. She acknowledges him as part of her while simultaneously rejecting what he represents. The transformation between their forms raises questions about identity and continuity of consciousness. When Marika becomes Radagon, does Marika cease to exist temporarily? Is Radagon aware during Marika's time in control? Or do they exist simultaneously, each always aware but only one able to act? The game provides no clear answers, leaving us to contemplate the horror and wonder of such an existence. Consider the practical implications of their shared existence during their reign. Royal functions, public appearances, private moments, all would require careful orchestration to maintain the illusion of two separate beings. Unless, of course, they possess the ability to be in two places at once, at least for a time. Some theorize they could manifest separately through magical projection or teleportation, as the two are never definitively recorded as being seen together. The children of their union with themselves carry unique significance in the game's lore. Malenia and Miquella aren't just cursed, they're cursed in ways that reflect their parents' nature. Miquella's eternal youth mirrors the stasis of godhood, forever unchanging. Malenia's rot reflects decay and renewal, destruction and creation, the cycle their parents embody. These aren't punishments for incest in the traditional sense. They're the inevitable result of existence folding in on itself, of a being reproducing through self-union. The revelation of their nature recontextualizes every interaction, every piece of history we know about the lands between. When Radagon studied sorcery in Raya Lucaria, was he trying to understand something Marika already knew? When Marika spoke to her children about their futures, did she see in them reflections of her own divided nature? Every moment becomes layered with new meaning, once we understand that two of the most important figures in the world's history were actually one. Their tale parallels real-world mystical traditions beyond just alchemy. In Gnosticism, the divine often manifests as syzygies, paired emanations of the Godhead, masculine and feminine aspects of the same divine principle. In Hinduism, Ardhanarishvara represents Shiva and Parvati as a composite androgynous form. These traditions recognize that divinity transcends simple binary classification, that ultimate reality might require paradox to be properly expressed. But Elden Ring takes these mystical concepts and grounds them in visceral, painful reality. This isn't abstract theology. It's a woman imprisoned in a tree, crucified by the very power she was meant to channel. It's a man desperately trying to repair what his other self destroyed. It's children born cursed because their parents were one person trying to be two, then two trying to be one. The boss fight against Radagon and the Elden Beast serves as the culmination of their tragedy. The Tarnished faces Radagon first, and if they die to the Elden Beast, they must fight him again. There's no separation between them possible anymore. When Radagon falls, his body doesn't simply die but is absorbed and transformed into the Elden Beast's weapon. He becomes literally what he perhaps always was, a tool of the greater will, a sword in the hand of a cosmic entity that never saw him as anything more than an instrument. The various endings of Elden Ring each offer different resolutions to Marika and Radagon's story, but none truly free them from their condition. If the Elden Ring is mended, Marika's head is restored to her frame. If Ranni is summoned, she picks up Marika's head gently, allowing it to peacefully dissipate. If the Tarnished becomes Lord of Frenzied Flame, Marika's head crumbles into ash. But in every ending except Ranni's, the cycle potentially continues. New god, same prison. The question of free will versus divine providence permeates their entire existence. Was their union always destined? Did the greater will orchestrate their merger from the beginning, or was it an accident that it merely exploited? When Marika shattered the Elden Ring, was she exercising free will for the first time in centuries, or was even this rebellion part of some cosmic plan beyond her understanding? Their story suggests that Godhood in Elden Ring isn't about power or immortality. It's about becoming a function, a role in a cosmic machine that grinds on regardless of personal desire or individual will. Marika became a god and lost herself. Radagon sought perfection and became a tool. Together, they achieved the highest possible status in their world and found it to be the ultimate prison. The influence of their duality extends into game mechanics themselves. The player can use both incantations and sorceries, combining the golden fundamentalism Radagon championed with the ancient practices Marika might have known from her Numen heritage. The very fact that the Tarnished can embody seemingly contradictory builds and playstyles reflects the world's fundamental acceptance that opposition can exist within a single being. Even the geography of the lands between reflects their duality. Leyndell, the golden capital, sits at the foot of the Erdtree, Marika's seat of power, Radagon's holy city, a single place that served two purposes. The divine towers scattered across the land activate great runes, fragments of their shattered wholeness that retain power precisely because they're broken, because sometimes division creates more than unity ever could. Their legacy lives on through more than just their children or the shattered Elden Ring. The very concept of identity in the lands between has been forever altered by their existence. They proved that one can be two, that self can be other, that unity and division are not opposites, but different expressions of the same fundamental truth. In a world where death can be removed from the natural order, where time flows strangely, where outer gods press against reality's boundaries, Marika and Radagon's impossible existence becomes almost logical, a paradox that explains other paradoxes. The relationship between Marika and Radagon ultimately transcends simple categorization. They're not just split personalities or alternate forms. They're not simply two people sharing a body or one person with two aspects. They are something unique, something that challenges our understanding of identity, consciousness, and existence itself. They are proof that in the lands between, even the most fundamental assumptions about selfhood can be shattered and reformed, just like the Elden Ring itself. As we near the end of this exploration, consider what their story means for the nature of love in Elden Ring's universe. Can you truly love another when you are also another? When Radagon loved Rennala, was that Marika loving through him? When Marika bore Godfrey's children, did Radagon experience motherhood? The boundaries between self and other, between internal experience and external expression, completely break down in their existence. The community of Elden Ring players and lore enthusiasts continues to debate and discover new aspects of their relationship. Every playthrough reveals new details, new connections, item descriptions that seemed unrelated suddenly link together when viewed through the lens of their duality. Environmental storytelling gains new layers of meaning. The game becomes richer, deeper, more complex with every revelation about these two who are one. Their story is also one of the most tragic love stories ever told in gaming. Not love between two people, but the impossible love of a being for itself, twisted into self-hatred and self-destruction. Marika couldn't accept what she'd become. Radagon couldn't accept what he lacked. Together, they were complete and completely miserable, unified and wholly divided, a god and a prisoner, a champion and a rebel. The final moments of their story, as we experience them in-game, are both climactic and anticlimactic. After all the build-up, all the lore, all the mystery, we find Marika hanging broken in the Erdtree, and Radagon emerges not to speak, not to explain, but simply to fight. There are no grand speeches, no villain monologues, no moment of recognition or reconciliation. There is only violence, the last resort of a being that has exhausted all other options. Yet perhaps this silence is the most eloquent statement of all. What words could encompass their existence? What explanation could justify or clarify the impossible paradox of their being? They are beyond language, beyond simple understanding. They can only be experienced, confronted, and ultimately transcended. The transformation from Marika to Radagon in that final battle is seamless, instantaneous, suggesting that by this point, the distinction between them has become almost meaningless. They are no longer two beings sharing a body or one being with two aspects. They are simply the enemy, the final obstacle between the Tarnished and the throne, the last guardian of an order that even they no longer truly believe in. When Radagon falls and becomes the Elden Beast's sword, it's almost a mercy. Finally, he achieves the simplicity he perhaps always craved, to be a tool, to have a single purpose, to exist without the constant internal conflict that defined his existence with Marika. But even this is temporary. The Elden Beast falls, the sword dissolves, and Radagon and Marika's story finally, truly ends. Or does it? In most endings, Marika's body remains, either restored or maintained as the vessel for the repaired Elden Ring. The Tarnished becomes her new consort, perpetuating the cycle that began ages ago. The prison changes wardens but remains a prison. The god gets a new partner but remains divided. The fundamental structures that created Radagon and Marika's tragedy remain intact, waiting to create new tragedies for future generations. This cyclical nature of their story reflects one of Elden Ring's core themes, that true change, true freedom might be impossible within the existing system. The only way to break free is to reject the system entirely, as Ranni does in her ending, or to destroy everything, as the frenzied flame seeks. Marika and Radagon's existence proves that reform from within is impossible when you are both the reformer and the system itself. Their tale serves as a warning about the price of power, the cost of divinity, the danger of seeking perfection. They achieved everything, godhood, kingdom, legacy, and lost themselves in the process. They became so great that they transcended individual existence, and in transcending, they discovered that there are fates worse than death, states of being more terrible than non-existence. As we conclude this deep dive into one of gaming's most complex relationships, we're left with more questions than answers. And perhaps that's as it should be. Marika and Radagon's story resists simple interpretation because they themselves resist simple existence. They are contradiction incarnate, paradox made flesh, impossibility given form and power and terrible purpose. Their legacy in the lands between is one of beauty and horror, order and chaos, creation and destruction. Every golden leaf on the Erdtree speaks to Marika's vision of perfection. Every battlefield littered with corpses speaks to the wars fought in Radagon's name. Every demigod child carries their blessing and their curse, their power and their madness. They are everywhere and nowhere, united and divided, eternal and ending. The story of Radagon and Marika is ultimately a mirror held up to the player, to the Tarnished who would claim their throne. Will you perpetuate their cycle? Will you break free? Can you succeed where they failed? Or are you doomed to repeat their tragedy? The game doesn't answer these questions for us. It simply presents the story, in all its fragmented, contradictory, impossible glory, and asks us to make meaning from the pieces. In the end, Radagon and Marika challenge us to think about identity, about the self, about what it means to be one person or two or something in between. They force us to confront the possibility that the boundaries we take for granted between self and other, between love and hate, between creation and destruction might be far more fluid than we ever imagined. They are Elden Ring's ultimate mystery, its central tragedy, and perhaps its greatest achievement in storytelling. Their tale reminds us that in the lands between, as perhaps in our own world, the greatest conflicts are often internal. The most profound struggles happen within single souls. And the most tragic figures are those who achieve everything they sought, only to discover that what they sought was their own undoing. Marika wanted to be free and became the ultimate prisoner. Radagon sought perfection and became perfectly trapped. Together, they created an age of gold that was always destined to shatter because they themselves were shattered from the very beginning. Thank you for joining me on this exploration into one of Elden Ring's deepest mysteries. The story of Radagon and Marika continues to evolve as players discover new details, as scholars debate interpretations, as the community collectively unravels the beautiful, terrible tapestry that From Software has woven. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the lore of the Lands Between, please like this video and subscribe to Keen Lore for more comprehensive explorations of gaming's most fascinating stories and mysteries. I'm currently working toward reaching subscribers, and your support means absolutely everything to this channel's growth. Every subscription helps me create more content like this, diving deep into the lore that makes these games so special. Until next time, fellow Tarnished, may you find your own path through the fog of mystery that shrouds the Lands Between.